So if you start asking questions and you know there's an opportunity, there's potential. And you look at this, and you look at this area, and you see asphalt, and small buildings. You don't really see a cohesive place. Those photographs, I think, showed it fairly well. But when you look at it from the sky, it's even more obvious. The planning staff at the city has been working on this process for a long time, too. Not too long ago, they developed a plan. It's a study. It's not an implementation. It's what can we do, what's possible in the Bonanza Park District. And they came up with a concept that was sort of form-based code. In other words, traditional street grids, similar in scale to what we have in Old Town. Something that's walkable, something you can use, where there's multiple activities going on that creates lively place. Well, as a developer and an architect, we had to go back and look at, okay, how can we implement that idea? What are the opportunities here? So we went back and said, here's the existing conditions, here's what's there, here's the property lines, here's the buildings that are there. How can we implement the idea the planning staff has put together and turn it into something that's possible? So we developed a potential street network. We used that basic idea, tried to work with most of the property lines. We got some help we're going to need with Rocky Mountain Power, the city. But this is one idea of how we can develop it. Start to see central core spaces. And these are the areas that we're working on. How could you extend it? That's a possibility. It's similar to the ideas that were developed in the document by the planning staff. But we're really talking about the street pattern and the areas that we've got this existing MPD. It's where we can make a difference as a developer and an architect. So if you understand what's going on, you want to understand how do you solve the problems that are there, what are the real problems? Well, today we have these roads that go around the perimeter. They really are arterial roads. And arterial roads move people to and from different places. They're interesting, but they failed somewhat because the arterials are also trying to function as a commercial street. And so they're working for two things. And if you try to do two things, you're probably not doing either one very well. And so we've looked at what can we do to solve that problem. Well, we've looked at developing a potential mountain boulevard, reducing those turn-ins, the turning actions, the curb cuts, all the different things that cause traffic patterns and log jams in town. And if you look at that in this situation, those little purple lines you see here become access points to the properties there. What's a potential mountain boulevard look like? This might be a section of it. And why is this important? Well, we have different issues in the mountains. We have different things that are going on. We have different aesthetics. So as mountain boulevards, this is an idea that we've developed. It shows how you might do that. You go allow the arterial traffic. This is Kearns Boulevard. This is a section. Here's 2 lanes going away. Here's 2 lanes coming at us. And you've got this center lane that's returning. And then we developed this landscape buffer, a relatively large space where we can plant mountain-type plants. It creates a place to store snow. One of the things that's really important, I think, here in this climate, anyway, is a place to make it work. Then we have our access, and then sidewalk or areas before you hit a building structure. We already have an idea in town that's very similar to that. This planting area that we've talked about, the one I've shown goes from here to about the creek bed, and the buildings start back here at about the road. So you get an idea of what the aesthetic of that might be, the opportunities that we have, and what it might be like. Once you start looking inside, you're saying, well, if the arterials are your commercial streets, where are they? Well, they're in the core. We're trying to create something interesting and lively. And if you put those in the core, the orange lines here represent what our primary commercial streets are. We've drawn a section through this piece right here, and we've called that out as sort of a market street. What's a market street? Well, you see these all over Europe. You see them on the East Coast. You see them in other older towns and cities where there's sort of a central core. They're an activity where there's both transportation happening and activities and places for community and people to interact. What's it look like? It might look something like that. Maybe there's more sidewalks here. Maybe there's mass transit in the center of this. There's an opportunity to create something really unique. But this is about the same scale and size of what we've shown. And then you get into secondary commercial streets, and what do those look like? And those are the lighter orange that we've shown here. So you start to develop more than just one street. You start developing activities where people can find places and get together and do different things. A section of that might look like this. Well, this is pretty close to the same dimension that we have on Main Street. Looks about like that. If you want to look at those heights, you want to look at those spaces, they're very, very similar to what's on the lower part of the old part of Main Street. Not a bad place. Mass transit. We talked about that in the initial concepts that were developed by planning. Mark's looked at this before, we've done other studies, but we want to make sure we preserve corridors for mass transportation, whether that's rapid transit bus systems, whether it's a light rail, some sort of streetcar, something in the future. You know, we may have 60,000 people here in the wintertime, just in the city limits from time to time. You never know exactly what we're pushing and how many people. We want to make sure we don't design our way into a place where we can't do that. It also leaves us the opportunity to connect this kind of commercial space to Old Town, connect it to out of town. I think that's a critical part, is that this becomes another node, another neighborhood in the city. So what does that do? Well, if you're a developer, you're going to be giving up space. You're going to be creating space for activity, for access, for community. And that's what the orange represents. Those are areas that we'd be dedicating in the private land. So that's just a potential street network. And we're just talking about transportation and creating different kinds of community space. What does that do? How do you do that? Well, in our world as architects, we have to go through a process. And that process is many-fold. And so the first thing we do here is we do a massive study. What is the existing underlying code? This is one version of it. We've done separate different versions of how it can be interpreted. But basically what our existing code says, you have certain setbacks and you have a certain height, you know, roughly 3 to 4 stories, depending on where you're at and how you design it. And that's what we get. It's kind of it doesn't really address the properties and the opportunities. So we took the existing density that was associated from that 3-story structure that was sort of like a pancake, and we put them back into the street network that we are proposing. How's that look? Well, when you do that, you're going to take some of that space and we're going to put them up on top of the space we just took. Mark referred to it as holding a piece of paper. If you've got something out here like this, and it covers this much space and you fold it over, it's taller, but it's covering less space. So that's the principle behind why we might be looking at additional heights. Another principle in it gives you an idea. Now, these are shown as green. All that space is in green space. That's space that's not being built on. So the footprints are the brown or the black, gray areas. This is what the underlying code, one of the versions is. This is how it worked within the proposed street network. So you get an understanding of what the difference is.